State, you can call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Edward Schmalfeld.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, good morning to you. Just watch your step as you come forward to your right.
Yes, sir.
Need a glass of water, let us know. We'll do our best to accommodate you. The only thing I ask is that if there's an objection made during the course of your testimony, just pause, let me rule on the objection, and then we'll go from there.
Yes, sir.
With that said, State, you may inquire. You're ready.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Edward Schmalfeld. I'm the general manager at Otis Road Landfill.
All right, and just generally speaking, where is the Otis Road landfill?
It's on the west side of Jacksonville, off of Otis Road, near Beaver Street.
And, sir, with respect to your position as general manager, what are your duties there as a general manager?
In charge of overall operation of the landfill, every aspect of it, from financial down to what the employees are doing out in the field.
And how long have you been working in that capacity?
At Otis Road, I've been there just over 5 years.
And how about working in this field? How long have you worked?
Since 2008, I've worked in landfills.
Now, do you live here in Jacksonville, sir?
Yes, sir.
How long have you lived in Jax?
Since in Jacksonville area, just over 5 years as well. But I've been in Northeast Florida since 1993.
All right. Now, sir, I want to direct your attention to January 15, 2019, moving forward about 3 weeks to February 6 of 2019. Do you recall that time period, sir?
Yes, sir.
Were you working in the same capacity at the Otis Road landfill during that time period?
Yes, sir.
Are you the boss?
I'd like to think so. Yes, sir.
Right. Now, did the police come find you and talk to you at the front end of that time frame on or about January 15 of 2019?
They did.
And for the purpose of what?
They were doing an investigation on a missing person.
All right. Did they ask you to search your landfill?
At that initial conversation, they did. They were asking general questions about the landfill, and we're looking at possibly doing a search, yes.
All right. And did you cooperate and assist the police?
Absolutely.
Now, when you first were speaking with the police, did you kind of give them an idea of how the landfill itself is operating?
Yes, sir.
Right? Did you go through them the general summary procedure of how waste comes in?
Yes, sir.
All right. Is that still the same procedure that's in effect even today?
Yes.
All right. Can you give our jury just sort of a brief walkthrough of, like, if a truck pulls up there with waste, take us from there. What happens next?
Sure. So we have a truck come in. We have a scale house up front. It's the first thing you see when you come to the facility. The trucks will pull up on the scale. We have scale house attendants who talk to them. They'll identify their company, what their truck number is, where they're coming from, if they're like Duval County, Clay County. And then if they have any other special information like project numbers or whatnot. Once they do that, they'll be weighed in. We'll give them a scale ticket, and they'll be directed to the active working area of the landfill. And once they get up there, we have heavy equipment operators and sometimes a spotter who's directing them exactly where to go. And once they get into their spot, they tip or they dump their load out onto the on top of other garbage, at which time, once they pull out, we'll have a bulldozer come, and they will push the garbage kind of wherever we're working in that day, because we're building it up as we go. And once that happens, we have a landfill compactor that's about twice as big as a bulldozer, has big cleated wheels. It rolls over the garbage. We're trying to pack it in as tight as we can so that we don't waste all that space. And we kind of rinse and repeat all day long.
Yes, sir. Now, excuse me. Just a couple questions about that procedure. When someone pulls in a truck, do you in any way have your staff search the vehicles before they come in?
No, it's all in a can. It's very hard. Not every truck even has an open top. We do have cameras that generally look at the truck, but we depend on the drivers to identify what they have. And then once they get up on top, we can, we work with it from there. We can see it. But at the scale house, that's the limit of what we can do.
Now, with respect to I think you called it a weight ticket that they receive, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Once they receive the weight ticket, how are they directed where to go inside the landfill?
Initially, it's by the scale house attendant. They'll tell them where to go. Sometimes if we've changed up something, we'll give them a map on where to go. And then we have signs along the way that direct them where to go.
All right. And you mentioned once the waste is pushed out of their particular vehicle, it's packed. You do it in levels. It's piled one on top of the other. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We try to do 5 to 7 foot lifts as we go to build up to our engineered design elevations.
And you also mentioned you had what's called a landfill compactor that packs it in tighter. Can you explain specifically what's the general purpose for doing that?
So for a landfill, we have this imaginary bubble on top, and that's as much garbage as we're allowed to put into it for the whole life of the site. And so our goal from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and obviously as a business, we want to maximize how much garbage we can put in there. So we try to densify that garbage to make it as tight as possible. We get about 1,400 to 1,600 pounds per 3 by 3 by 3 area. So we try to get it as tight as we can.
And can you give our jury a sort of an estimate of the height that you build the waste up to, generally speaking?
It changes as we go, but as our permit is now, it's about 150 feet total height when we're finished with it.
Now, can you give us an idea of how many trucks are coming into the landfill on a daily basis as an estimate?
So at that time, it would have been somewhere around 150 to 200 trucks per day on a normal day.
And would that have been the approximate trucks arriving during the time period that we're talking about, December of 18 and January of 19?
Yes, sir, approximately.
That's an estimate at that time.
Yes.
Right. Now, what specifically would you need to know to be able to tell the police where specifically to search in the landfill?
First and foremost, I need to know the date. What day are we talking about? Obviously, with that many trucks coming in, we move periodically. So I need to know the date, and then knowing the truck and company that brought it in would allow us to go and look at our scale house records to verify that it actually did come in.
All right.
Those are the 2 big pieces of information.
And we've already had some testimony about that, but did the police advise you of a date?
Yes.
Did they advise you of the company that brought the waste in?
Yes, it was actually our sister company, the hauling company, and they told us the location it came from. Yes, sir.
Was that All American, the sister company?
Yes.
All right. And I think it's already been established as well, but did the waste they were looking for come from Ace Pick Apart?
It did.
Did those factors help you in sort of pinpointing to the police where to conduct their search?
Yes, sir.
All right. In general, how big is the entire landfill?
So at that time, we were working on a footprint of about 8 acres. The whole cell that we're working on was 10 acres, but we hadn't finished it all yet. So about 8 acres was the working area.
Okay. Now, with the factors that you had, the date they were looking for the particular waste, the company that delivered it, and where it came from, the business where it came from. With those 3 factors, explain to our jury how you're able to tell them where to go in that particular landfill. Is there a method to this?
So there's a couple tools we used. First, we fly aerials of the landfill pretty much on a monthly basis with a drone. So I could refer back to the prior one. Second, we have an engineered sequence that we put garbage in, so it's already designed kind of where we go. So that's another tool. We can vary a little bit, but that's another tool. And third, just being out there every day, we know we don't just plan one day ahead of time. We're looking at 6 months at a time, so it was very easy kind of to say, hey, over the last 3 or 4 weeks, we've been working in this area.
All right. Is it safe to say the entire landfill is a massive area?
Oh, absolutely. Right now, we're already at 40 acres. It's huge, especially when looking for small things.
Right. In December 2018, leading into January 2019, I think you described it as how many acres at that time?
The landfill itself is about 8 acres of usable space at that time.
All right. Of those acres, could you tell us where specifically you sent the police and the acreage that you directed them to assist them in their search?
Sure. It was. It would have been kind of on the western portion, middle of the landfill. It was, I think we estimated it around 3 to 4 acres was kind of the general area that we were searching.
Right. And if the police came to you in January 15 of 2019 and you knew they were looking back at the date of December 19 of 2018, how far down did you give them as an estimate to do their search to look for that area of waste?
So we looked at all of our tonnage that had come in between those 2 periods and looked at kind of how well we were packing it. We came up with about 20 feet, 25 feet, somewhere right in that range.
So did you then give the police the 3 to 4 acre period and a 20 feet depth length to conduct their search?
We did, yeah. We isolated it immediately when they said they were going to want to do a search. So when we knew that, we isolated the area.
Sir, is that a massive undertaking?
It was yes. I mean, we debated on if we actually had to potentially close the landfill temporarily, because taking out half of our total footprint and you don't get to work on all that, it was a substantial thing. Having kind of 2 operations going at once, it was outside the norm. We actually even contacted the Florida Department of Environmental Protection just to make sure we legally could do the search and continue to operate.
Yes, sir. Now, once the search began, just a few more questions for you, sir. Once the search began, what was your role during that time period from mid-January to early February? What were you doing to aid the police?
Lots. So they initially had their entire team come out. I guess it was the search management team. And first thing we did is we went over a lot of safety concerns that I had. Obviously, it's a landfill. It's lots of pointy and sharp things, potential for somebody to get injured. They talked about what they thought the process would be to do the search, asked my thoughts on that. I provided my feedback. Then once they started the search on a daily basis, there was a morning briefing. I was part of that, especially as they brought new searchers in, and just reiterating the safety aspects of what's going on and explaining how the rest of the landfill is running, just so we don't, again, get anybody injured. During the search, my team was using the heavy equipment that worked hand in hand with the search teams, and we would excavate and spread out the garbage that was going to be searched. And once it was cleared, we would take that and put it over to another designated area so it wouldn't get commingled with the search area. We didn't want to search the same material twice. And then there was a debrief at the end of every day that I was part of. And then there were a couple off-site meetings downtown here. I think the sheriff was at 1 or 2 of them, just kind of with updates. So we were part of that as well. And then me and my team were actually out there, getting dirty, getting our boots dirty and helping however we could with the search team, especially when you get into some of these deeper areas. It's a little more dangerous. You got to be more familiar with what you're doing. Yes, sir.
And then the last couple issues for you. The type of waste. Will you describe for our jury what you allow or what is permitted inside the Otis Road landfill?
Sure. We are what the DEP calls a Class 3 landfill, which allows us to take construction and demolition debris, which is probably about 85% of the material we get, which is cardboard, 2x4s, drywall, sheet, all that kind of stuff, concrete. We also can take some soils and things like that, but the big thing that we don't take is food waste, any kind of waste that can break down, create an odor. We don't take liquids, but it's primarily construction and demolition debris.
And because you don't take food waste, does that generally keep the active bird life, like buzzards, from infecting the various areas of your landfill?
Correct. Yeah, we rarely have birds, and if we ever do see a bird, that's when we kind of key in if somebody brought in something they weren't supposed to, and we have to go get it and take it out of the landfill.
All right. And can you give the jury an idea of a few major companies and or contracts you have to kind of explain the types of waste that would come in there?
Sure. So we really work with every company you see driving down the road, except Waste Management in general. So Republic Services is a big one. Now it's GFL Environmental, but it used to be All American Roll-Off. So they're roll-off trucks. They're the big cans that you see when they're building homes and whatnot. That is primarily what we get at our landfill. Sometimes we'll get some dump trucks, but all the major companies within Jacksonville bring in material, as well as smaller, like the Ace Pick Apart, like they're one-offs, but they're brought in by one of the larger companies as well.
All right, and what do you mean by a one-off?
They're not like this national, they have one location. So we have numerous customers who just have a office or a construction yard. They have one can that is sitting there that gets picked up.
Is a good example of the type of waste you receive Goodwill?
That is a waste that we do get, but I wouldn't say that's a good example of the typical waste. It's more construction waste. Goodwill does come in, but they're really the only type of person who routinely brings in that type of waste, which is a lot of furniture, carpet, toys, clothes, that sort of thing.
Yes, sir. And then lastly, were you able to, and if so, first explain how you were able to add up all the tonnage, all the amount of waste that was searched by the sheriff's office during those approximately 3-week period?
So we looked at it a couple different ways. One, obviously, the drone flights were going over, so you can do calculations based off of the flights, looking at what it was before and where it was at the end. And also looking at the hole that we dug, knowing that, okay, it's about this long, this wide, this deep. You can do a calculation of the approximate amount of waste that was taken out. And then on a daily basis, we would look at how many buckets the excavator took out and kind of estimate it. So use multiple methodologies, and they kind of all corresponded. So we felt comfortable. It was give or take that I think it was 5,000 to 5,500 tons that we thought we went through.
And for our record, just to make sure it's clear, what is a ton? How much is that?
2,000 pounds.
You did 5,500 tons of garbage and waste searching.
Yes, sir.
One moment, Your Honor. Sir, can you lastly just give us a, you know what the police were looking for?
Yes.
And you know the area that was covered. Would you describe that as like looking for a needle in a haystack?
Yeah, absolutely. Based off of the time from initial notification to when we kind of got down to that 20-foot depth, extremely difficult. I've had instances in the past where somebody has come in and they knew exactly the truck. They got there before the truck, and we still couldn't find it in an individual truck. Obviously, different types of things. It was a purse or something like that. It's very, very difficult to find anything once it hits the ground at the landfill, especially 3 or 4 weeks out.
Yes, sir. One moment. Thank you, Your Honor.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
All right, let me just follow up on a few things here. So I know that you guys actually started searching January 15th of 2019, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But you actually had stopped, you got notification that they wanted to search almost a week, maybe even a week and a half earlier than that, correct?
Approximately, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so at that time when you received notification that police were wanting to search the area, you guys no longer dumped in that area where you believed this particular dumpster that they were looking for had been in, correct?
Correct, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So did you cordon that area off essentially to make sure that no further activity happened where you would be searching?
We put some berms of dirt up around the area, and then at the scale house, they directed the trucks, the new location to go, and the heavy equipment operators made sure they went there.
Okay. As far as the type of waste, I know you described being class 3 and Goodwill in particular. So it would not have been abnormal for clothing to be in that search area that you isolated for this particular search.
No, ma'am.
Okay. And you actually were a part of the search for most of those days, if not all of the days, that police were searching at the landfill.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you actually were in the hole, like physically there, seeing and observing what was being pulled out and kind of managing, making sure safety procedures were followed and things along those lines, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you actually saw the excavators taking out pieces and kind of laying it out in the search of what was in there.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so did you yourself observe clothing and other items, typical things that you would see, as well with construction materials?
Yes, ma'am. There was a mixture. Yes.
I know that you talked about kind of how you got to this particular area, this depth, this amount of acreage that we're going to search. My question for you is, when you came to that conclusion, that wasn't something that you just guessed or estimated, right? You actually used the scaler that when people come in to determine how many tons had come in at that time to get to that estimate.
Yes, ma'am.
So there was actual data that you referenced and looked to so that you'd be confident that you were in the right area and searching the amount that was sufficient to be able to get to that dumpster that they were looking for.
Yep, to the best of our ability. Yes, ma'am.
And during that search, I know you've talked about it being more than 5,500 tons that you guys went through, which is a massive amount to search, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. In going through that, you were confident that you reached the area that that dumpster would have dumped in, correct?
We were in the, yes, I think we were within the area that we had established to start with. In terms of the length and width area, for sure. In terms of depth, that was our initial kind of calculation assumption. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then as far as that amount that you gave, 20 feet deep, 3 to 4 acres, you actually overestimated the amount to make sure that that December 20th dumpster would be included, correct?
Yes, ma'am. And more the length and width, just because we wanted to, be thorough, and things can get pushed a little bit to the side, so we want to make sure it was all inclusive. Yes, ma'am.
And just to confirm, the 5,500 tons that you searched would have covered that 3 to 4 acres and 20 feet deep area that you estimated, correct?
It should have. Yes, ma'am.
And throughout that search where you were physically there, you never did recover any sort of body or anything like that, correct?
No, ma'am, we did not cover her body.
And I just want to kind of go back because I know you said that now it's like 40 acres, it's quite a bit larger. It was quite small at the time compared to other landfills and dump sites, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry.
It was. I'm sorry.
No,
it
right.
It was closer to the start of the landfill, so we were much smaller back then, especially compared to the other landfills in Jacksonville.
Okay. And I know you said that you did confirm that that particular dumpster came from Ace Pick-A-Part.
Yes, ma'am. That's what the scale house ticket indicated, and that was the normal route, routine for that truck.
And the type of waste that you would receive from Ace Pick-A-Part was kind of a mixture of a lot of things. Is that accurate?
Yes, ma'am. It would have been, if I recall, it was auto parts, boxes, cardboard, that sort of material.
Including anything that might be inside the vehicle as well, emptying out the contents of any vehicles that they might receive.
Yes, ma'am. Potentially, yes.
As far as the presence of any sort of buzzards or things like that, in your experience, you said that, if you did notice them, which you did from time to time, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If you did notice them, then that would be an indication to you that maybe food waste or something like that was there.
Potentially, yes, ma'am.
Because that's the type of waste that you don't receive or don't allow to come into your facility.
Correct.
Okay, in those cases, you would then go out, as you said, and actually remove that food waste or materials that you don't allow.
We would try to locate it, yes, and if we could, we would dig it out.
Okay, so for example, if there was something dumped that was not supposed to be there that would attract buzzards and then it was compacted down, if during a search that then is being pulled up and exposed, would that cause buzzards to come into that area?
Potentially, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so it doesn't mean necessarily that there was a body there.
Correct.
It could just mean that there was food waste there that shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, potentially, yes, ma'am.
One moment, Your Honor. Nothing further.
No redirect, thank you, sir.
Sir, good to see you.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.